This was my nightmare in the mid-70s. The skulking, heavy-breathing sleestacks were a terrifying, not-to-be-missed part of Saturday morning. Dozens of zany characters walked the fine line between magical and maniacal, all thanks to Sid and Marty Krofft. I'm Victor, and straight out of the Gen experience, we would wake up early to take in all our favorite heroes, villains, and friends on Saturday mornings. Sometimes those characters might thrill us, sometimes they may frighten us, and sometimes they made us say, "What the f***?" Hey folks, if you like your Saturday morning Gen X style, please click that like and consider subscribing. I would really appreciate your help. Kids television, especially Saturday mornings, had only just begun to emerge in popularity in the mid to late 60s. Looking for more children's television, the Greek brothers from Canada were recruited. The master puppeteers who had made good from vaudeville to the circus and then theme parks to TV first entered the field by creating the larger-than-life animated character costumes for Hanna-Barbera's Banana Splits. From there, it was no brainer taking their marionette beginnings to iconic puppet status on television. Sid and Marty Krofft ruled the 70s, and with reruns, the earliest to the latest Gen Xers were fans of the kooky characters of Krofft. They produced their first show that same year. Who doesn't remember fondly the living island inhabited by H.R. Pufnstuff? Taking cues from Banana Splits, they added a layer of psychedelic eccentricity, solidifying the Sid and Marty Krofft distinctive style. The magic flute character was a main star, but coming to life in close-ups in Jimmy's shirt pocket, the magic flute just weirded me out, especially knowing that Jimmy had just blown him. However, the villainous Witchy Poo and her delirious visage and personality not only made her a great bad guy, but memorable enough to make her a star in her own right, appearing on other shows, infamously the Paul Lynde Halloween special with the Wicked Witch of the West, Carol Brady, and Kiss. Best not to think about that. But it was Pufnstuff who was the hero, a huge, kind, yellow, and magical dragon who was also the mayor. Because, of course he is. Pufnstuff's design clearly inspired a certain burger chain and one of their mascots, who conveniently was also a mayor. Mayor McCheese wears a sash, has a medal, and his supersized burger face is an unmistakable copy of HR's design. Yes, there was a lawsuit, but both ended up taking their rightful place in history. H.R. Pufnstuff may only have filmed 2 seasons, but it continued to play for more than a decade, introducing so many children to the imaginative and inexplicable world of Krofft.
The Bugaloos?
If the monkeys can do it, why can't some insects? The Bugaloos were a fictional band in a fairy-like mystical world, complete with a giant jukebox. One of my favorite Krofft shows swarmed onto the scene in 1970. They may have been British, but there were no Beatles in sight. The talentless villain, living in said jukebox, blaring unpleasant music into the world, haplessly tries to become a musical superstar while trying to take out our foursome consisting of a grasshopper, bee, ladybug, and butterfly. If Martha Ray's Benita Bazaar makeup wasn't enough to scar you, Woofer and Tweeter, 2 anthropomorphic stereo speakers, might just do it. But the always imaginative, if not somewhat jarring sidekick Sparky, played by the incredibly talented Billy Barty, leaned only slightly over the line of unsettling. Billy appeared in various roles throughout the Krofft universe, and Sparky, he was a good Firefly, and we were falling in love with the aesthetic that Sid and Marty could have only imagined during a fever dream or a smoke-filled basement.
And I like my free ride!
In a 2005 interview with USA Today, Marty Krofft said, "No drugs involved. You can't do drugs when you're making shows. Maybe after, but not during. We're just bizarre, that's all." Referring to the alleged LSD use, Marty said in another interview, "That was our look. Those were the colors. Everything we did had vivid colors, but there was no acid involved. That scared me. I'm no goody two-shoes, but you can't create this stuff stoned." Yeah, sure. With the Bugaloos' success as a fictional band, a trope of the era, that meant a very real official musical album release. Why not? Josie and the Pussycats and the Archies did it among others. It worked, and this absolutely bonkers premise had been cherished and remembered for decades. Lidsville of 1971, where the characters are anthropomorphic hats of various styles living in fear from hoodoo. Like this little, fireman. Wait, that's not the fireman? My bad. Mark, Butch Patrick of Eddie Munster fame, accepted this without question, and although desperate to find his way home, assisted the hats where he could from their oppressor. Another world of trippy fantasy filled our Saturday mornings with spiraling colors and kooky characters like Big Chief Sitting Duck and Weenie the Genie. had us excited to see what came next. What did the Kroft brothers have up their sleeves? The only nightmare in Lidsville is Charles Nelson Riley riding around on his Hatamaran. No, not catamaran, Hatamaran. The Bugaloos had been my favorite so far. What about yours? Sticking with the formula while simultaneously never repeating themselves, their next show is also a favorite and went from a world of talking chapeaux inside a magician's hat to Dead Man's Point and a one-toothed sea monster. Legendary child actor Johnny Whitaker led the human side of things, but the shuffling, kelp-covered kraken Sigmund was the draw. Like so many of their shows, Sigmund and the Sea Monsters from 1973 to 75 centered on youth or the childlike innocence at the heart of it all. Other than the occasional floppy, misshapen face of the billowing hollow costume, it was the songs sung about how the kids were feeling that day that were terrifying.
When all it does is rain.
So you've made 4 successful kid shows. What do you do next? Build a theme park, of course. That sounds normal. Tapped on the shoulder to fill 4 stories worth of Kroft creative content, the men leapt at the chance to continue live immersive performances centered around their marionettes and build their burgeoning empire showcasing their current TV creations. It was decided the theme park would be inside the new Omni International Complex in downtown Atlanta, the murder capital of the US at the time. As you can imagine, that didn't bode well, and after a promising opening, the attendance dwindled fast. The park was ideally located within the building with lots of natural light and loaded with exciting experiences. A 3-tiered crystal carousel, walk-around animated talking costume characters of HR and Sigmund made appearances, and a ride through an oversized pinball machine thrilled audiences. Who wouldn't love that? Passengers embark inside pinballs, avoiding inserted quarters while bouncing around the blinking, whirring, mechanized gameplay. The whole place hovered over a skating rink on the first floor. Did anyone watching visit this park? I would love to know your thoughts. It would have had to been a slim window to attend as rides broke down often and rising crime kept guests away and attendance down. Within 5 months, the park was shuttered. Today, only the longest set of escalators built at the time remain in what is now the CNN Center. Disappointed, sure, but giving up was not the Kroft way. There was so much more TV to offer. In the mid-1970s, the golden era of Saturday morning TV is in full swing, and you and I both know that we would go on to love the newest Kroft contributions to our Saturday morning ritual. Lost Saucer got a jump on Star Wars in 1975 with some space shenanigans right before their doomed theme park had opened. Starring famous faces, Ruth Buzzy and Jim Neighbors in what looks like old-school robot Halloween costumes, they accidentally abduct some children who don't seem to be so worried about getting home. Going beyond any nightmare, this horse-headed dog hybrid alien is either the cheapest costume character sidekick I've ever seen or what happens when the transporter malfunctions. Or both. No, not Gilligan's Planet, but far-out space nuts with Gilligan. I mean Bob Denver as a NASA mechanic who instead of pressing lunch, accidentally launches he and his friend Barney into space. It isn't their new cuddly cosmic pet, Honk, who's nightmarish, but all the sad and pathetic alien life forms sporting sorry-ass costume and makeup that rival the original Lost in Space. Then came the daddy of all Kroft shows. You know what I'm talking about. If you didn't know them before, Kroft made history with the legendary Land of the Lost. By the end of 1976, this fascinating and exciting kids action show was in its last season. Land of the Lost, with its incredibly catchy story theme song, made it clear the peril this family found themselves in when taking the wrong waterfall into a world not too far removed from our own prehistorical past. Dinosaurs weren't extinct in this time-warped dimension, and we feared for the lives of the Marshall family as they ran to escape Grumpy, the T-Rex. As was often in Kroft shows, a cuddly but creepy little creature would befriend the main stars. In this case, a caveman boy, more accurately, a Pakuni, named Chaka. He was uncomfortable to watch sometimes, but the real nightmare came with the surprise appearance of the dreaded green and scaly Sleestaks. Giant orb eyes with menacing wide grimaces under their small nostrils, topped off by a horn protruding from their head that matched the oversized nails on their claws and feet, made the Sleestaks one of the scariest images for any kid chowing down their honeycomb on a Saturday morning. Just try to think of another character from your cartoon lineup that caused this much anxiety. Luckily, Rick, Will, and Holly Marshall had befriended the time-traveling Enoch, differentiated by wearing his sparkling gold tunic over his bronze skin. He spoke English, and although still stern and alarming in his own right, he was harmless to our heroes. Shocked to learn there was an actual 1991 reboot of the show just proves its place in pop culture. You know, I always thought Sleestaks looked a lot like asparagus spears. I hated asparagus. Having created the animal band Hosts and Banana Splits to introduce cartoons, Sid and Marty turned it up a notch when they created a live-action band that introduced more live-action shorts for the Krofft Super Show. Running from 76 to 78, it incorporated various Krofft adventures on a rotating basis during both seasons. Having filmed their live-action sequences of the band in their Atlantic theme park before closing, there was little about this amplified 5-member, then 4-member glam rock band that you could take seriously, including their name, Captain Cool and the Kongs, all starting with K, which makes for a very unfortunate acronym. Being the glue that held the show together, an official album release was a given, including the theme song, comedic sketches, and even some unmemorable singles by the band. Looking at this group, bedazzled with face jewelry and sociopathic grins, they were no doubt nightmare fuel. But when it came to the 15-minute serialized segments, they were hits and misses. I remember being slightly on edge when Dr. Shrinker arrived on the screen. It was a kind of Land of the Giants TV show, but for kids. The premise was engaging enough, but the Doctor, performed by Jay Robinson, was delivered with a melodramatic flair of evil that produced a sense of real danger for me when he appeared. But what would you expect from a man who once played Emperor Caligula on the big screen? Now, there was nothing too nightmarish about Electro Woman and Dyna Girl, except maybe those early spandex superhero suits. However, I know many viewers of a certain age who had an awakening seeing Deidre Hall in those tights. Mild-mannered reporters, sounds familiar, fight supervillains with Batman-type monikers, none more insanely on point than Glitter Rock. Classic 70s. Then there was Wonderbug. Teenagers rebuild their Kit Bash set of wheels, which they call Schlepp Car, with a magical horn. When it's honked, their junker transforms into Wonderbug, a dune runner come to life, voiced by the master of non-human noises, Frank Welker. A talking dune buggy wasn't a hard sell. Herbie the Love Bug and Speed Buggy got audiences to embrace this concept. However, Wonderbug could fly. Yeah, fly. Which helped the teens solve crimes. The only crime for this show was the insanely implausible traps Barry would conjure up to capture the bad guys. Oh, and the acting. Magic Mongo was a second season Genie and the Lamb segment that is better left forgotten. But Bigfoot and Wild Boy, now there's a fan favorite. A fairly original idea long before Harry and the Hendersons, an orphan boy raised by Bigfoot worked together to save the forest, just like Avatar. Bigfoot isn't scary, just kind of really sad. Its popularity led to its own 30-minute show. A second season was filmed, adding to the previous 15-minute segments that would be edited together for half-hour season 1 episodes. Wild Boy might have been Bigfoot's most memorable TV appearance. Well, that is after his $6 Million Man debut. Broadcast right up until the new decade, I always liked it because it took place in my neck of the woods, the Pacific Northwest. What do you expect? That's Bigfoot's stomping grounds. Instead of a third season of Krofft Super Show, they rebranded as Krofft Superstar Hour in 1978 through 79 and replaced Cool and the Kongs with the Bay City Rollers, a more popular mainstream band who had provided me the soundtrack of my roller skating youth. Saturday Night was one of my all-time favorite songs from the late to mid-70s. Their involvement in the new Krofft Show led to a third name change. The Superstar Hour became Bay City Roller Show after the 8th episode. The band did songs and comedy, and along with Mr. Munchie, oh my god. If that isn't a nightmare, I don't know what is. Along with Mr. Munchie, they introduced brand new segments, Horror Hotel and The Lost Island, which just feature characters from other Krofft media like Witchy Poo, go figure, HR Pufnstuff, Hoodoo, Weenie from Lidsville, Sigmund from Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, and of course Enoch the Sleestack from Land of the Lost. Although curiosities, these bits are very rarely referenced today, and as that show ended, the 70s came to a close, and with it, the original brand of children's entertainment only Krofft could come up with. We would never see its like again. But even before the sunset of their Saturday morning spectaculars, the Kroffts had dipped their toe into prime time. Variety was the spice of life in the 70s. Variety shows, that is. Keeping busy with so many projects, they produced a number of adult offerings. Don't misunderstand, they're about as fluffy as one can get, but still appealed more to adults due to the star power behind them. The same folks who brought Lidsville and Bigfoot and Wild Boy to life handed the world these gems: Donnie and Marie from 76 to 79 and the Brady Bunch Variety Hour in the 1976 to 77 season. Ah, but Pink Ladies and Jeff, that was the Kroffts' entrance into a new decade, and hot garbage. This variety show lasted 5 episodes, with a 6th unaired, starring 2 Japanese women, the titular Pink Ladies, who didn't speak or understand a lick of English, along with American comedian Jeff Altman. This wasn't gonna fly, and one look at it and you'll know why. Although slowing down production, they didn't hold back. Variety shows were dead in the 80s, but Richard Pryor was on top. So the Krofft brothers broke into sitcoms. HR Pufnstuff creators now created Pryor's Place. Competing with Sesame Street was a losing battle from the start. Pryor's Place might have been a sitcom, but it was still on Saturday mornings and aimed at kids using puppets, of course. A baffling idea considering Pryor's style of humor. The Muppets won this turf war when this 1984 outing was more like a train wreck. Never ones to be discouraged, they did another sitcom, but this time they went back to their roots. This time a sitcom with puppets. Some might say avant-garde for the time. DC Follies was a 1987 to 88 sitcom starring the funny Fred Willard in political satire at a bar in DC, patronized by celebrity-inspired puppets. Think Cheers, with a big dose of Genesis' Land of Confusion video. Confusion is probably what Sid and Marty Krofft were contending with in this new era. They ended the decade of excess with one more project that was to kick off the 90s. A 1-hour TV movie was to be a pilot of sorts, a comedy of late-night news programs. With Leslie Nielsen starring, you might think you have a hit, but Krofft Late Night did not resonate with the changing times. Most of you are probably aware of the Will Ferrell Land of the Lost movie from 2009, right? That just proves the Krofft legacy continues long after the success of the shows that made them all a household name. Sid and Marty Krofft gave the world so much joy during that generation, and because it is still remembered today, it proves the best stuff came from the Gen Experience. Because of this, the brothers were given a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame for TV in 2020. Sadly, in late 2023, one half of the pair passed away. Marty Krofft said goodbye, and adults everywhere, for just a moment, bowed their head in reverence. Marty passed not having been a spectator, but someone who left us everything he could muster. Which Krofft shows were your favorite, and which do you think were some of the zaniest, kookiest, cringy characters they ever came up with? Discuss with me in the comments, I'm always in there. I hope you've clicked that like and subscribe. And now, go look for other great shows on the channel. It really goes a long way to help. Thank you for joining me, and until next time.
The Bugaloos?
Reservations recommended.